David adjusted his tie one last time as he stood outside the towering glass building. The morning sun reflected off the chrome letters spelling Tech Vision Corporation above the entrance. He checked his phone again, 9 a.m. sharp, just like the email confirmation had stated. This was it, the meeting that could change everything. Walking through the revolving doors, David felt the cool air conditioning hit his face. The lobby was impressive, marble floors so shiny you could see your reflection, modern art pieces scattered around, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Everything screamed success and money. He approached the reception desk where a blonde woman in her 30s sat typing on her computer. Her name tag read Jennifer. She had perfectly manicured nails and wore a crisp white blouse that probably cost more than David's monthly grocery budget. "Good morning," David said with a warm smile. "I have a meeting with Mr. Hartwell at 9 o'clock. David Johnson." Jennifer barely lifted her eyes from her screen. She glanced at him for maybe 2 seconds before looking back at her computer. "I don't see anything on the calendar," she said flatly. David felt his heart skip a beat. "Could you please check again? I have the confirmation email right here." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to find the message. "I already checked," Jennifer replied, her tone suggesting she was already annoyed. "Mr. Hartwell doesn't have any meetings scheduled for today." "But here's the email," David said, holding his phone out to show her the screen. The subject line clearly read, "Meeting confirmation, Tech Vision Corp, 9 a.m. Tuesday." Jennifer barely glanced at the phone. "Anyone can fake an email," she said with a slight roll of her eyes. "Are you sure you're at the right building? Maybe you're looking for the community center down the street?" The comment hit David like a slap. He was wearing his best suit, the navy blue one he'd bought specifically for important meetings like this. His shoes were polished, his shirt was pressed, and he carried a leather briefcase that contained the most important presentation of his career. "I'm quite sure this is the right place," David said, keeping his voice calm and professional. "Could you perhaps call Mr. Hartwell's office directly?" Jennifer sighed dramatically. "Look, I'm telling you there's no meeting." "You must be confused." David noticed something interesting happening around him. While Jennifer was giving him the runaround, other people were walking through the lobby. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit approached the desk next to him. "Good morning. I'm here for the Johnson Industries presentation," the man announced cheerfully. Jennifer's entire demeanor changed instantly. Her face lit up with a bright smile. "Of course. Mr. Patterson, right? Let me get someone to escort you up right away." She picked up the phone immediately. David watched this interaction with growing frustration. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Within 30 seconds, a security guard appeared to escort Mr. Patterson to the elevators. "Excuse me," David tried again. "I really do have a meeting scheduled. Could you just make one phone call to confirm?" "Sir, I've already told you." Jennifer's voice had an edge to it now. "There's no meeting. You're going to have to leave." David noticed 2 security guards had positioned themselves nearby. They weren't doing anything threatening, but their presence was clear. He felt their eyes on him, watching his every move. "I'll wait," David said politely. "Maybe there's been a scheduling mix-up. When Mr. Hartwell arrives, I'm sure we can sort this out." Jennifer's expression darkened. "You can't just wait here. This is a private building." "I understand, but I have a legitimate appointment," David replied. "I'm not causing any trouble. I'll just sit over there until this gets resolved." He gestured toward the seating area, a collection of modern chairs arranged around a glass coffee table. Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but another visitor had approached the desk, so she turned her attention away from David. David walked over to the seating area and sat down. He pulled out his laptop and reviewed his presentation one more time. The app he'd developed was revolutionary, a simple but powerful tool that could help small businesses manage their inventory more efficiently. It had already gained 50,000 users in just 6 months, all through word of mouth and organic growth. The numbers were impressive. Businesses using his app reported a 30% reduction in inventory costs and a 25% increase in efficiency. He had testimonials from restaurant owners, retail shop managers, and even small manufacturing companies. This wasn't some pie-in-the-sky idea. This was a proven product that was already making a real difference for real people. As he sat there, David watched the parade of visitors coming and going. Every single person who approached the reception desk was treated with courtesy and respect. Every single one was quickly escorted upstairs. And every single one was white. The pattern was so obvious it made his stomach turn. But David had learned long ago that pointing out these kinds of patterns usually made things worse, not better. So he sat quietly and waited. Around 10:30, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s walked through the lobby. David recognized him immediately from the company website. Robert Hartwell, the CEO. This was the man he was supposed to meet with. David stood up and approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Hartwell. I'm David Johnson. I believe we had a meeting scheduled this morning." Hartwell looked confused. "A meeting? I don't recall." He glanced toward the reception desk. "Jennifer, do I have anything with a Mr. Johnson today?" Jennifer's face flushed slightly. "No, sir, nothing on the calendar. This gentleman has been waiting here claiming he has an appointment, but I told him there was nothing scheduled." Hartwell looked back at David with a mixture of confusion and mild annoyance. "I'm sorry, but if there's no meeting on the calendar, then there must be some mistake. Perhaps you should reschedule through proper channels." "Sir, I have the confirmation email right here," David said, pulling out his phone again. "We were supposed to discuss the acquisition proposal for my inventory management app." Something flickered in Hartwell's eyes. "Inventory management app?" "Yes, sir. The proposal I sent last month. Your assistant confirmed the meeting." Hartwell paused for a moment, and David could see him trying to remember, but then Jennifer spoke up again. "Sir, you have the board meeting in 5 minutes. You really should get upstairs." Hartwell nodded. "Right, of course, Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry, but I really don't have time right now. If you'd like to reschedule, please contact my office through the proper channels." He walked toward the elevators without looking back. David stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of disappointment settle on his shoulders. Around him, the lobby continued its busy rhythm. People came and went, deals were made, futures were decided. But for him, the door had just closed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. Walking back to the reception desk, he placed it in front of Jennifer, along with a handwritten note. "Please make sure Mr. Hartwell gets this," he said quietly. Jennifer glanced at the card dismissively. "Sure, whatever." David walked toward the exit, knowing she would probably throw the card away the moment he left. But he had to try. As he pushed through the revolving doors, he felt the morning sun on his face again. The day that had started with so much promise now felt heavy and uncertain. But David Johnson wasn't the type to give up easily. As he walked down the sidewalk, his mind was already working on the next move. If TechVision didn't want to see his potential, maybe it was time to find someone who would. Behind him, the glass building gleamed in the sunlight, completely unaware that it had just made one of the biggest mistakes in its corporate history. 3 months earlier, David Johnson had been sitting in his small apartment, staring at his laptop screen with tired eyes. The clock on his desk showed 2:47 a.m., but sleep was the last thing on his mind. Lines of code scrolled across his monitor as he fine-tuned the algorithm that would become his breakthrough. His apartment wasn't much to look at. A one-bedroom place in an older building where the walls were thin, and the heating didn't always work. But it was his, and more importantly, it was where dreams were being born. David's journey to this moment had been anything but easy. Growing up in Detroit, he was raised by his mother, Linda, after his father left when David was just 8 years old. Linda worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day, and doing people's laundry on weekends. Money was always tight. There were nights when David went to bed hungry so his mother could eat. There were winters when they huddled together under blankets because they couldn't afford to turn up the heat. But Linda never let her son see her despair. Every morning she would wake up with determination and tell David the same thing. Education is the only thing nobody can take away from you. David took those words to heart. While other kids were playing video games or hanging out at the mall, David was at the library. The computers there became his escape and his passion. He taught himself programming by reading outdated books and experimenting with free software. His high school guidance counselor tried to steer him toward more realistic career paths. "Maybe consider trade school," she suggested. "Programming is very competitive. You need connections in that field." But David's math teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, saw something special in him. She stayed after school to help him with advanced calculus. She wrote recommendation letters and helped him apply for scholarships. When David got accepted to the state university with a full scholarship, Mrs. Rodriguez cried harder than his mother did. College was its own challenge. David felt out of place among students who had grown up with advantages he could only dream of. While his classmates talked about spring break trips to Europe, David worked nights at a campus security desk to send money home to his mother. But he excelled academically. Computer science came naturally to him, and he loved the logic and problem-solving aspects of programming. His professors took notice. Dr. Kim, his software engineering professor, became a mentor and encouraged David to think beyond just getting a job, to think about creating solutions. After graduation, David landed a position at a mid-sized tech company. The work was good and the pay was better than anything his family had ever known. He moved his mother out of Detroit to a nice apartment closer to his job. For the first time in their lives, they didn't have to worry about money, but David wanted more than just financial security. He wanted to make a real difference. The idea for his app came from an unexpected source. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who owned a small grocery store. She was constantly struggling with inventory. Too much of one item, not enough of another. She would either lose money on spoiled goods or lose customers who couldn't find what they needed. David offered to help. He spent weeks studying her business, learning about the challenges small business owners faced. What he discovered was that the existing inventory management solutions were either too expensive or too complicated for small operations. So he started building something different, something simple but powerful, an app that could track inventory, predict demand, and help small businesses make smarter decisions without breaking their budget. Working nights and weekends, David coded and tested and refined. He used Mrs. Chen's store as his testing ground, gradually improving the app based on real-world feedback. When Mrs. Chen's inventory costs dropped by 30% in the first month, David knew he was onto something big. He quietly launched the app, expecting maybe a few dozen users. Within a week, he had 500. Within a month, 5,000. Word spread through the small business community like wildfire. Restaurant owners, retail shops, even small manufacturers started using it. The app was free to download, with premium features available for a small monthly fee. David kept his day job, but watched as his user base grew exponentially. By the 6-month mark, he had 50,000 active users and was generating enough revenue to quit his job and focus on the app full-time. That's when the acquisition offers started coming in. First, there were the small players, companies looking to add his technology to their existing platforms. Then came the bigger fish. TechVision Corporation was one of the most established names in business software. When they reached out, David felt like he'd hit the lottery. The initial conversation had gone well. Robert Hartwell's assistant, Patricia, had called personally. She was professional and enthusiastic, praising David's innovation and Mr. Hartwell's interest in the acquisition. "Mr. Hartwell is very impressed with what you've built," Patricia had said. "He sees tremendous potential for scaling your solution across our entire client base." They discussed numbers. The initial offer was $2.3 million, plus a position as Director of Product Development. For a kid from Detroit whose mother had cleaned offices to pay the rent, it felt surreal. Patricia had sent the meeting confirmation email herself. "Tuesday at 9 a.m. sharp," she had written. "Mr. Hartwell is looking forward to meeting you in person." David had prepared for weeks. He researched TechVision's client base, studied their existing products, and crafted a presentation that showed exactly how his app could integrate with their platform. He practiced his pitch until he could deliver it in his sleep. The night before the meeting, his mother had called to wish him luck. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Linda had said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your daddy would be proud too, wherever he is." David had fallen asleep that night dreaming about the future. He would take the acquisition money and start a fund to help other young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. He would hire developers from underrepresented communities. He would prove that talent comes from everywhere, not just the places where people expect to find it. But now, walking away from the TechVision building, those dreams felt further away than ever. David pulled out his phone and looked at the confirmation email one more time. There it was, clear as day. Meeting confirmation, TechVision Corp, 9 a.m. Tuesday. He scrolled down to Patricia's signature. Her direct phone number was listed at the bottom. David considered calling her to find out what had gone wrong, but something told him it wouldn't matter. The receptionist's dismissive attitude, the security guard's watchful eyes, the CEO's quick retreat. It all painted a clear picture. David sat down on a bench outside the building and opened his laptop. The rejection stung, but it also fueled something deeper. If TechVision didn't want to partner with him, fine. There were other companies, other opportunities. He pulled up his contact list and started making notes. Innovate Solutions had reached out a few weeks ago. At the time, David had been so focused on TechVision that he'd put them on the back burner. Maybe it was time to return that call. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "David, the app helped me save another $200 this week." "You're a genius." Messages like that reminded David why he'd started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about the money or the recognition. It was about helping people like Mrs. Chen, like his mother, like everyone who had been overlooked or underestimated. David closed his laptop and stood up from the bench. The TechVision building loomed behind him, full of people who thought they knew everything about business and success. But they had just made a mistake that would cost them dearly. As David walked toward the subway station, he felt something shift inside him. The disappointment was fading, replaced by determination. TechVision had judged him by his appearance and decided he wasn't worth their time. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 2 days after the TechVision disaster, David sat in his apartment reviewing his options. The rejection still stung, but he wasn't the type to dwell on setbacks. His mother had taught him that sometimes the door that slams in your face is just redirecting you toward a better opportunity. He pulled up the email from Innovate Solutions that had been sitting in his inbox for 3 weeks. The message was from their CEO, Angela Martinez. Unlike the formal corporate tone of most business correspondence, her email felt genuine and personal. "Hi, David," it read. "I've been following your app's growth and I'm genuinely impressed. Your solution addresses real problems that big tech companies often ignore. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership that could benefit both our companies and, more importantly, the small businesses we serve. Would you be interested in a conversation?" David had initially dismissed the email because TechVision was his dream partner. They were the established giant, the company that could instantly scale his app to millions of users. But maybe that thinking was backwards. Maybe he needed to find someone who truly understood his vision, not just his profit potential. He researched Innovate Solutions more thoroughly this time. What he found surprised him. Angela Martinez had built the company from scratch 15 years ago, starting in her garage with 2 employees and a revolutionary idea for small business accounting software. Her story resonated with David. Like him, she had faced skepticism from established players in the industry. Like him, she had been underestimated because she didn't fit the typical CEO profile. She was a Latina woman in a field dominated by white men, and she had succeeded by focusing on solutions rather than politics. Innovate Solutions now employed over 200 people and served more than 10,000 small businesses across the country. But they had maintained their startup mentality, constantly innovating and staying close to their customers' needs. David decided to call Angela directly. He found her personal number listed on the company website, an unusual touch that suggested she was still accessible despite her success. "Angela Martinez," she answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm and confident. "Ms. Martinez, this is David Johnson. You emailed me a few weeks ago about my inventory management app." "David, I was hoping you'd call. I've been watching your user numbers and they're incredible. 55,000 active users now, right?" David was impressed. She had been paying attention. "Yes, growing by about 8% each week. That's organic growth, which is the best kind. Listen, are you free for lunch today? I'm in town for a conference and I'd love to meet face to face." The difference from his TechVision experience was immediate. No gatekeepers, no scheduling through assistants, no bureaucratic hurdles. Just a direct conversation between 2 entrepreneurs. They met at a small cafe downtown. Angela arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in jeans and a blazer. She was in her early 40s with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Everything about her seemed genuine and unpretentious. "So tell me about your journey," she said after they ordered. "I want to understand not just what you've built, but why you built it." David found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. He told her about Mrs. Chen, about his mother's 3 jobs, about the library computers where he learned to code. Angela listened intently. asking thoughtful questions and sharing her own experiences. When I started Innovate Solutions, Angela said, everyone told me I was crazy. The market was dominated by huge companies with unlimited resources. But I knew they weren't really listening to small businesses. They were building products for enterprises and then trying to scale them down. That never works. That's exactly what I see with inventory management, David agreed. The existing solutions are either too complex or too expensive for a small restaurant or retail shop. Show me what you've built, Angela said. Pulling out her tablet, David walked her through the app, demonstrating its features and explaining the logic behind each decision. Angela asked technical questions that showed she truly understood software development. She wasn't just a business executive trying to sound smart. She was a programmer who had built systems herself. This is elegant, she said, after David finished the demo. Simple on the surface but sophisticated underneath. That's the hardest kind of software to create. They talked for 3 hours. Angela shared her vision for expanding Innovate Solutions' platform to include inventory management as a core feature. But unlike TechVision's acquisition approach, she wasn't talking about buying David's company and absorbing it into their existing structure. I'm thinking partnership, Angela explained. You maintain ownership of your app, but we integrate it seamlessly with our accounting platform. Our clients get a complete business management solution, and your app gets access to 10,000 potential new users immediately. The numbers were compelling. Innovate Solutions was offering a partnership deal worth $3.8 million upfront, plus revenue sharing that could be worth much more in the long term. David would also get a position as Director of Mobile Innovation, with equity in the combined platform. But beyond the money, Angela was offering something TechVision never had: respect and genuine collaboration. I want you to build a team, Angela continued. Hire the best developers you can find, especially people from underrepresented backgrounds. Diversity isn't just politically correct, it's good business. Different perspectives lead to better solutions. By the end of lunch, David felt energized in a way he hadn't since before the TechVision meeting. This felt right. Angela understood his vision and shared his values. She had built her company by solving real problems for real people, not by acquiring competitors and crushing innovation. I need to think about this, David said, though his gut was already telling him the answer. Of course, Angela replied. Take all the time you need. But David, I want you to know something. When I was starting out, a lot of people slammed doors in my face. Some of them probably thought they were doing me a favor by not wasting my time. But every door that closed just led me to a better one. 2 days later, David called Angela to accept the partnership offer. The legal details took a few weeks to sort out, but by the end of the month, David Johnson had officially become Director of Mobile Innovation at Innovate Solutions. The integration process was smoother than David had dared to hope. Angela's team was professional and collaborative, treating David's app as a valuable addition rather than an acquisition to be absorbed. They worked together to create seamless data flow between the inventory management system and Innovate Solutions' accounting platform. Within the first month, David's app gained 20,000 new users, all existing Innovate Solutions clients who had been waiting for exactly this kind of functionality. The user feedback was overwhelmingly positive. This changes everything for my restaurant, wrote one user. I can track inventory and see exactly how it affects my bottom line, all in one place. David hired his first employees, 3 talented developers he had worked with before, plus 2 recent graduates from coding boot camps designed for career changers from underrepresented communities. The team was small but mighty, full of people who understood what it meant to build something meaningful. 6 weeks into the partnership, David received an unexpected phone call. Mr. Johnson, this is Patricia Wilson from TechVision Corporation. I was Mr. Hartwell's assistant when you tried to meet with him a few months ago. David remembered the name from the original email confirmation. Hello, Patricia. I wanted to call because there seems to have been some kind of mix-up with your meeting. I had you scheduled for 9 a.m. that Tuesday, but somehow the receptionist didn't have it on her calendar. Mr. Hartwell is still very interested in discussing an acquisition. David smiled to himself. Word was getting around the industry about his partnership with Innovate Solutions. Suddenly, TechVision was interested again. That's very kind, David said politely. But I'm no longer available for acquisition discussions. I've entered into a partnership agreement with another company. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, Well, perhaps we could discuss acquiring your partner company as well. Mr. Hartwell is prepared to make a very generous offer. I appreciate the call, Patricia, but I'm very happy where I am. Thank you, though. After hanging up, David sat back in his new office, a real office with windows and everything, and reflected on the journey. 3 months ago, he had been devastated by TechVision's rejection. Now he realized it was the best thing that could have happened to him. Angela knocked on his office door. How's the team integration going? Perfectly, David replied. We should be ready to launch the enhanced platform next month. Excellent. Oh, and David, I just got off a call with a reporter from Tech Innovation magazine. They want to do a feature story on our partnership. The angle is how collaboration beats acquisition in the new economy. David grinned. Sounds like a great story. It was indeed going to be a great story. And David couldn't wait to see how it ended. 6 months after the partnership launch, David stood in front of a wall-mounted monitor displaying real-time user statistics. The numbers were staggering, 200,000 active users and growing by 12,000 each week. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real story was in the testimonials flooding their support email. Restaurant owners reporting 40% reductions in food waste, retail shops increasing their profit margins by 25%, small manufacturers optimizing their supply chains in ways they never thought possible. David's app, now fully integrated with Innovate Solutions platform, had become the go-to inventory management solution for small and medium businesses across the country. What made it special wasn't just the technology. It was the understanding of real business needs that had guided every design decision. David, you need to see this, called out Lisa, one of the developers he'd hired 3 months earlier. She was a career changer who had been a restaurant manager before learning to code. Her real-world experience made her insights invaluable. Lisa pointed to her screen, which showed a detailed analysis of their user base. Look at who's switching to us from TechVision's inventory system. David leaned over to look at the data. TechVision had been the market leader in business software for over a decade, but their inventory management module was outdated and clunky. It had been designed for large corporations and awkwardly adapted for smaller businesses. 15 major clients switched to us this month alone, Lisa continued. And look at these company names. David scanned the list and felt his eyebrows rise. These weren't just small businesses. They were mid-sized companies with substantial operations. Restaurant chains with dozens of locations. Retail companies with stores across multiple states. Manufacturing companies that supplied major brands. How did they even find out about us? David asked. Word of mouth, mostly, replied Tom, another team member who specialized in user analytics. Our client satisfaction scores are through the roof. When business owners find something that actually works, they tell everyone they know. The success was gratifying, but David knew it was also making waves in the industry. Companies like TechVision had dominated the market for so long that they had become complacent. They assumed their size and established client base would protect them from nimble competitors. Angela Martinez appeared in the doorway of David's office. She was holding a tablet and grinning. You're going to love this, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. I just got off a call with the CEO of Mega Food Industries. They want to switch their entire operation to our platform. Mega Food Industries was a Fortune 500 company that operated restaurant franchises nationwide. They currently use TechVision's enterprise solution for everything from inventory to payroll. They're not happy with TechVision? David asked. That's an understatement, Angela laughed. Their current system is so complicated that they have to employ a full-time IT specialist just to manage their inventory data. Meanwhile, their franchise owners are complaining constantly about spoiled food and stockouts. She showed David the proposal on her tablet. Megafood wanted to implement their integrated platform across 800 restaurant locations. The contract would be worth $12 million over 3 years. This is huge, David said, though part of him felt nervous. Are we ready to handle something this big? We'll need to scale up our support team, Angela replied. But technically the platform can handle it. Your app was designed to be scalable from the beginning. Over the next few weeks, news of the Megafood deal spread through the industry. Trade publications picked up the story, and suddenly everyone was talking about the small company that was taking on the established giants. Innovate Solutions lands massive contract, read the headline in Business Software Weekly. The article detailed how David's inventory management system was disrupting traditional business software models. But the real earthquake came 2 weeks later. David was in a planning meeting when his phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made him do a double take. TechVision stock drops 15% after losing major clients. He opened the full article and read with growing amazement. TechVision had just announced that they were losing 3 major clients to competitors, representing over $50 million in annual revenue. The stock market had reacted swiftly and harshly. "Did you see this?" Angela poked her head into the conference room. "I'm reading it now," David replied. The article quoted TechVision's CEO, Robert Hartwell, trying to downplay the losses. "We're always seeing movement in the marketplace," he was quoted as saying. TechVision remains the industry leader with a strong portfolio of innovative solutions. But industry analysts weren't buying the spin. One expert was quoted saying, "TechVision has been resting on their laurels for too long. Nimble competitors are eating their lunch by actually listening to what customers need." David felt a complex mix of emotions reading the article. There was satisfaction, certainly. TechVision had dismissed him without even giving him a chance, and now they were paying the price. But there was also a sense of responsibility. Their success wasn't just about beating TechVision. It was about serving customers better. "How does it feel to be David slaying Goliath?" asked Mike, their head of marketing, who had just joined the meeting. "It feels like we're just getting started," David replied. And he meant it. The media attention was nice, but what really excited David were the emails from small business owners whose lives had been changed by the app. A single mother who owned a bakery and could now predict exactly how much flour to order each week. An immigrant family who ran a grocery store and had reduced their waste by 60%. These were the stories that mattered. That afternoon, David received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Wilson from TechVision was in the lobby, asking to speak with him. David was curious enough to agree to the meeting. Patricia looked nervous as she sat down in his office. "Mr. Johnson, I wanted to apologize personally for what happened when you tried to meet with Mr. Hartwell," she began. "There was clearly a communication breakdown and you were treated poorly." "I appreciate that," David said carefully. "Mr. Hartwell is very interested in discussing a partnership now, or perhaps acquiring your company. He's authorized me to offer $50 million for your portion of the integrated platform." David kept his expression neutral, but inside he was astounded. 6 months ago they wouldn't even confirm he had a meeting. Now they were offering 20 times what they had originally proposed. "That's a generous offer," David said, "but I'm not interested in selling." Patricia looked surprised. "Perhaps you'd like to think about it." $50 million is a lot of money." "It is," David agreed, "but some things are worth more than money. I'm building something here that matters to people. Why would I want to give that up?" After Patricia left, David sat alone in his office thinking about the conversation. The offer was tempting, he had to admit. $50 million would set him up for life, but it would also mean giving up control of the app that had become his life's work. More importantly, it would mean going to work for the same company that had judged him by his appearance and decided he wasn't worth their time. The irony wasn't lost on him. David's phone rang. It was his mother. "Baby, I just saw an article about you online." Linda's voice was full of pride. "It says you're revolutionizing business software. I don't understand all the technical stuff, but I understand that you're helping people. That's all I ever wanted to do, Mom. Your daddy would be so proud. I know I am." After hanging up, David looked out his office window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in restaurants and shops and small factories, business owners were using his app to make their operations run more smoothly. They were reducing waste, increasing profits, and building better businesses. TechVision's stock price would probably recover eventually. Big companies always found ways to bounce back. But David had proven something more valuable than short-term market gains. He had proven that talent and innovation could come from anywhere. That the best ideas weren't always found in corporate boardrooms or elite networks. Sometimes they came from young people who had grown up without advantages, who understood struggle and had learned to build solutions from the ground up. David opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his team. Tomorrow they would start working on the next phase of the platform, features that would help businesses not just manage inventory, but predict market trends and optimize their entire supply chains. TechVision had taught him an important lesson, though not the one they intended. They had shown him that sometimes The biggest favor someone can do for you is to underestimate you. The market disruption was just beginning. The annual Tech World Conference was the biggest event in the business software industry. 5,000 attendees, hundreds of vendors and keynote speakers who shaped the future of technology. David had attended as a regular participant 3 years running, usually sitting in the back rows and dreaming of the day he might have something important to contribute. This year was different. This year, David Johnson was the opening keynote speaker. Standing backstage, David could hear the buzz of conversation as attendees filled the massive auditorium. Angela Martinez appeared beside him, straightening his tie with the care of a proud mentor. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little," David admitted. "This is a big stage. You belong here," Angela said firmly. "Your story needs to be heard." David's presentation was titled Innovation from Unexpected Places: How Understanding Real Problems Creates Real Solutions. The conference organizers had wanted him to focus on the technical aspects of his app, but David had insisted on telling the complete story, including the parts that made some people uncomfortable. The auditorium lights dimmed, and David walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The massive screen behind him displayed the logo of Innovate Solutions alongside his app's interface. 3 years ago, David began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I sat in the back of this very auditorium, watching keynote speakers talk about innovation and disruption. I was just another face in the crowd, a small-time developer with a big dream." He clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of Mrs. Chen standing in front of her grocery store. "This is Mrs. Chen. She owns a small grocery store in my neighborhood. 2 years ago, she was losing thousands of dollars every month because she couldn't efficiently manage her inventory. Too much of some items, not enough of others. Sound familiar?" Murmurs of recognition rippled through the audience. Many of the attendees worked for companies that served exactly these kinds of small businesses. David walked them through his journey, from the late nights coding in his apartment to the app's explosive growth. He showed real data, real testimonials, real impact, but he also told the harder parts of the story. 8 months ago, I had a meeting scheduled with TechVision Corporation, David said, clicking to a slide that showed TechVision's logo. "I was excited. They were the industry leader, and I thought partnering with them would be the key to scaling my solution." In the front row, David could see Robert Hartwell shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The TechVision CEO had probably not expected to be called out by name in a keynote presentation. "I arrived on time for my confirmed meeting," David continued. "I was wearing my best suit, carrying my most important presentation, ready to change my life. But the receptionist told me there was no meeting on the calendar. When I showed her my confirmation email, she suggested I might be at the wrong building. Maybe the community center down the street." The auditorium had gone completely quiet. These kinds of stories weren't usually told at industry conferences. I watched other visitors come and go that morning. Every single one was treated with courtesy and respect. Every single one was immediately escorted upstairs. The pattern was obvious to anyone paying attention. David clicked to the next slide, which showed a timeline of events: his rejection by TechVision, his partnership with Innovate Solutions, their rapid growth, and TechVision's subsequent decline in market share. "Here's what TechVision didn't know that morning," David said. "By dismissing me without even listening to my proposal, they weren't just rejecting one person. They were rejecting an approach to innovation that starts with real problems and real people." The next slide showed customer testimonials and usage statistics. David's app now served 300,000 active users across 12 countries. The integrated platform with Innovate Solutions had captured 23% of the small business inventory management market in just 8 months. "Innovation doesn't come from boardrooms or focus groups," David explained. "It comes from understanding the daily struggles of people like Mrs. Chen. It comes from listening to problems that big companies consider too small to matter." David glanced at the front row again. Robert Hartwell was staring at his phone, probably checking TechVision's stock price. It had dropped another 8% just that morning after news broke of yet another major client defection. 6 months ago, TechVision offered to acquire my company for $50 million, David revealed. It was 20 times their original offer, made after they realized what they had missed. The audience stirred with interest. Acquisition offers of that size were major news in their industry. "I turned them down," David said simply. "Not because of the money, but because of the principle. You can't build trust after breaking it. You can't claim to value innovation after dismissing it without consideration. David's final slides showed his vision for the future. The platform was expanding beyond inventory management to include predictive analytics, supply chain optimization, and automated business insights. They were hiring aggressively, with a focus on recruiting talent from unconventional backgrounds. We're also launching the Opportunity Fund, David announced, a $10 million investment fund specifically for entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. Because the next breakthrough innovation might come from someone sitting in the back row of this auditorium, someone who just needs a chance to be heard. The applause was immediate and sustained. David could see people in the audience standing, and the energy in the room was electric. But David wasn't quite finished. "There's one more thing I want to say," he continued as the applause died down. "To the young developers and entrepreneurs in the audience who look like me, who come from neighborhoods like mine, who have been told that success in tech requires connections and privileges you don't have. You belong here. Your perspective matters. Your solutions are needed." He clicked to his final slide, which showed Mrs. Chen's grocery store again. But this time she was smiling and holding a tablet displaying the inventory app. Mrs. Chen's store is now 60% more profitable than it was 2 years ago. She's hired 3 additional employees and is considering opening a second location. That's what real innovation looks like. Not disruption for its own sake, but technology that actually improves people's lives. The standing ovation lasted for 3 full minutes. As David walked off the stage, he felt a sense of completion. He had told his story fully and honestly, without sugarcoating the difficult parts or overselling the technical achievements. Backstage, Angela was waiting with a huge grin. "That was perfect," she said. "Exactly what this industry needed to hear." But the real validation came in the form of the people who approached David throughout the rest of the conference. Young developers who thanked him for representing their experiences. Small business owners who shared how his app had changed their operations. Investors who wanted to learn more about the Opportunity Fund. On the second day of the conference, David was approached by a familiar face. Robert Hartwell looked older than he had 8 months ago, with new lines around his eyes and gray creeping into his hair. "Mr. Johnson," Hartwell began. "I was hoping we could have a private conversation," David agreed, and they found a quiet corner of the conference center. "I owe you an apology," Hartwell said, his voice lacking its usual corporate confidence. "Not just for the meeting mix-up, but for what it represented. You were right yesterday when you talked about patterns. I've been thinking about it all night." David waited for him to continue. "We've lost 4 major clients in the past 3 months," Hartwell admitted. "Our stock is down 30% for the year. The board is asking hard questions about our innovation strategy." "I'm sorry to hear that," David said, and meant it. He took no joy in TechVision's struggles. "I've been CEO for 12 years, Hartwell continued. "I thought I understood this business. But watching your presentation yesterday, I realized how out of touch we've become. We've been so focused on maintaining our market position that we stopped listening to what customers actually need." David nodded. "It's easy to get caught up in the competition and forget about the people you're trying to serve. Would you consider consulting for us?" Hartwell asked. "Not acquisition, not partnership. Just guidance on how to reconnect with our customer base." David thought about it for a moment. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm pretty committed to building our own platform right now." "Of course," Hartwell said. "I had to ask, though." They shook hands, and Hartwell walked away looking like a man who had learned an expensive lesson. That evening, David called his mother from his hotel room. "I watched your speech online," Linda said, her voice full of emotion. "When you talked about that receptionist suggesting you go to the community center, I wanted to drive down there and give her a piece of my mind." David laughed. "It worked out for the best, Mom." "I know it did, baby, but it still makes me angry. You worked so hard to get to that meeting." "The right doors opened eventually," David said. "That's what matters." 3 months later, David was back in his office reviewing the latest quarterly numbers. The Innovate Solutions platform now served 450,000 businesses worldwide. The Opportunity Fund had made its first 3 investments, backing a mobile payment app for street vendors, a scheduling system for independent contractors, and an inventory solution specifically designed for farmers markets. TechVision's stock had partially recovered, but they were still struggling to regain market share. Industry publications were calling it a cautionary tale about the importance of staying connected to customer needs. David's story had been featured in business schools. As a case study in innovation and entrepreneurship, he received speaking invitations from around the world, though he was selective about which ones to accept. His priority remained building and improving the platform that now helped nearly 500,000 small businesses operate more efficiently. Mrs. Chen stopped by his office one afternoon with homemade cookies and an update on her business. She was indeed opening a second location, and her daughter was planning to study computer science in college. "She wants to build apps like you," Mrs. Chen said proudly. "She says she wants to help people the way you helped us." After Mrs. Chen left, David sat in his office reflecting on the journey. The rejection at Tech Vision had felt devastating at the time, but it had led him to something much better. Working with Angela and Innovate Solutions had allowed him to build something meaningful while staying true to his values. His phone buzzed with a text from one of the Opportunity Fund recipients. "Just signed our 10,000th user. Thank you for believing in us." David smiled and got back to work. There were still problems to solve, still people to help, still innovations waiting to be discovered by someone willing to listen to the right voices. The boy from Detroit who had learned to code on library computers was now helping others find their own paths to success. And somewhere out there in a small business or a garage or a library, the next great innovation was probably being born. All it needed was someone willing to give it a chance.